Hello, everybody. Welcome to Resounding Visions. I'm Christine Diekman. I'm a professor in the Department of Art, Media, and Design, where I teach film, video, and sound studies. And I'm also professor of Introduction to Sound Studies, which is one of the courses that is hosting our series tonight. I'm here with my colleague, Professor Diaz.
Hello, everyone. My name is Misael Diaz. I'm an assistant professor of art, media, and design at Cal State San Marcos and the instructor of AMD 368, Art of World Cultures, which is the other course that has been hosting the Resounding Visions speaker series this semester. We wanted to begin today's presentation with a land acknowledgement. Professor Diekman and I would like to acknowledge that we are speaking to you tonight from the unceded territory of the Kumeyaay peoples. That our speakers Leslie Garcia and Paloma Lopez will be speaking from the lands of the Nahuatl and Chichimecas respectively, and that the meeting place of CSUSM and its surrounding areas is still home to the 6 federally recognized bands of the La Jolla, Pala, Pama, Pechanga, Rincon, Soboba Luiseño, Payamcahuicham people. We would like to take this moment to acknowledge and express our appreciation and respect for those groups whose homelands we reside and learn on, recognizing that they are stewards of this land from time immemorial, in spite of the ongoing violence of settler colonialism. Given that we're not all together for this session, we invite you to look into whose ancestral homelands you reside on by consulting the resources that we will pop into the chat in just a second, recognizing that this is a first step in acknowledging the resilience and strength of Indigenous communities and expressing solidarity with efforts to undo their intentional erasure.
Thank you, Misael, for that important and gracious acknowledgement. So welcome again to Resounding Visions. This is a year-long series of BIPOC artists, musicians, and scholars at the intersection of sound and art to explore forms of cultural resistance and affirmation. The programming committee for this series includes faculty members Misael Diaz, myself, Christine Diekman, Ana Luisa Patrisco, and Jeff Ray. I want to extend a very special thank you to Steve and Laura Wagner and the Epstein Family Foundation for the generous fundings that makes these events possible. We also want to thank the School of Art staff for their support, especially Albert Rascon and Kevin Coleman. All the presentations are online via Zoom with a link provided before the presentation, and events are Thursday evenings at 5:30 Pacific Standard Time. We have one more event coming up, and we urge you to stay informed by following us on Instagram, and I'll type that into our chat. Professor Diaz will offer more information and introduce our presenters for tonight.
So before I get to those introductions, I wanted to let you all know that in lieu of using the chat to share questions and comments with our presenters, we please ask that you use the Q&A function. We're going to be closing down the chat shortly, so if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to type those into the Q&A, and we will make sure to address those after the presentation. Today's presentation by Interspecifics will last approximately 50 minutes, and afterwards we were going to be opening it up to questions and comments, which Professor Diekman and I will be reading out loud for our presenters to respond to. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speakers for tonight, Leslie Garcia and Paloma Lopez of Interspecifics. Interspecifics are a nomadic multi-species collective creating multimedia sound installations and performances that use sound as a pathway for connection across time and between species. Their practice has included developing mechanoacoustic instruments which combine ancestral knowledge with digital technologies to translate natural forces like the movement of tectonic plates and the currents of rivers into sound, fostering new relationships to the environment. Their current research and some of their older research analyzes non-anthropocentric modes of communication, imagining a shared interspecies language that is built upon bioelectrical activity of bacterial consortiums, plants, slime molds, and human beings. This has led to the creation of artificial intelligence machines to identify repeated coordinated actions inside biological cultures and transform these into musical and visual scores. They have shown their work and conducted workshops internationally at venues including the Bauhaus University in Berlin, the ICAS Festival in Dresden, Germany, FACT Liverpool in England, Media Lab Prado in Madrid, Spain, the Museum of Modern Art in Medellin, Colombia, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Santiago, Chile, TJ in China in Tijuana, and the Tamayo Museum in Mexico City, Mexico. Their work has also been awarded by ECAS, the European Cities of Advanced Sound Network, and the WAG Society of Amsterdam, as well as the Vancomer Foundation and the National Fund for Culture and the Arts in Mexico. So we're so excited to have them joining us, and please welcome Leslie Garcia and Paloma Lopez.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
So much for having us.
We're super glad to be here. We want to start this session first with a little general introduction of the collective, because it is more than Paloma and I. So there are 4 people on the
Sometimes
project.
4, sometimes 6, sometimes 8.
Yes, and we're continuously growing. So right now it's like uncertain how many people is in the collective. But yes, it's also Felipe Rebolledo, Emmanuel Anguiano. We're also working with Alfredo Lozano, Carles Tardillo, Mariana Perez Bobadilla, Fernan Federici, biologist and one of our main scientific collaborators.
So what we plan for today, it's a little introduction on our methodological practice in 15 minutes, and then we're gonna go a walkthrough. We're gonna do a walkthrough through one of some of our pieces. We hopefully gonna see some of them, and I'm gonna start by sharing my screen. And yes, as Misael was saying, we acknowledge ourselves as a nomad collective for a long time. We were just traveling around the world. We settled down just a few months before the pandemic started. So we were really grateful to be home at the time. And we also acknowledge ourselves as a multi-species collective, because we like, as well as we have presented our fellow humans, collaborators, we also like to integrate and present all the species we work with as part of the collective. We're gonna see through all of our projects who are in the group also. So yes, as Misael was saying also, our current lines of research are using artificial intelligence and some other form of machine learning techniques and other technologies to find patterns and to study different forms on what we call non-human communication in different species. So the great question that has gathered interspecifics, all the participants, is in relation to this question of what is reality. This is what we're really interested in, and we want to, if not to answer it, just to open this question and to let the process in between maybe answering, maybe not, to change our life, to give us some tools that in which we can understand ourselves as part of this macroorganism called Gaia, to stay further from the idea of this anthropocentric view of the human as the pinnacle of all the species, and start to seeing these interrelations and sometimes hidden, sometimes very apparent in between all of us. And we've been trying to find some methodologies. We started by acknowledging that the first part of the perception of our reality is from our senses, and first just our 5 first senses, and also the non-traditional senses that sometimes we are not that aware of, such as proprioception and others. And then we started to think about non-human senses as a possibility to complement or enhance our own ability to perceive the world in a more collective way. So in this sense, we use art both as a language and as a methodology to to intersect different disciplines, to intersect different lines of thoughts, sometimes not really related in between, sometimes already related, but that to try to take down limitations, to try to concile and to bring ideas together without sometimes, you know, methodological limitations in between disciplines. And maybe Les would like to add on this.
And in that sense, we believe that the process of creation, it's interconnected with different areas and methodologies. And in this case, this image from Mary Oxman, the Circle of Krebs, explains the nature of creativity in human sense. And you can see there in a way, what she's trying to explain is that everything is interconnected. The generation of knowledge comes from the science perception of nature, and then engineering takes that perception and that knowledge and creates utility on it. And then design produces culture by creating behavior. And finally, art produces culture and perception with the same knowledge. So everything comes from the same origins and has different needs and positions on this realm of creation. And we believe that our practice is deeply connected with these ideas, where philosophy, culture, economy, technology, it's interconnected and is creating new agents for modifying in a way this reality in which we are immersed.
And in this sense, we've been building on this concept called ontological machines, which are exactly, it's a sort of oxymoron, that because we could think that machines we have never been able to make conscious of themselves, but we like to think that in helping us making ourselves conscious, there will be a kind of sci-fi kind of semantic dream in which we also gain consciousness as a collective being. We've been building our different machines, as we will see now in the walkthrough of all of our projects, that want to grasp into other realms, like in this case, in the bioelectricity of other beings such as bacteria, and try to expand the concept that we have of intelligence through this other kind of the otherness entities that are around us.
And I would like to add something here, that for us, the idea of expansion, sensory expansion, is very important. And on the ontological part of these devices, the idea of being capable to perceive through the senses of the others, it's something that we try to engage and we try to develop. And our whole process of production, it's related with this idea. And this idea is something that we are sort of taking from the scientific work, from the concepts of neuroplasticity by Paul Bakirita, where he explains that it's possible to connect different new senses to the human perception if you're capable to send bioelectrical signals to it. So that's why we decided to start working with all these different organisms, and we're going to see a little bit more about this process.
In this in this long journey that we started in 2013, we've been thinking on bridges that could travel through these realms, because there's this, of course, ontological situation in which humans would never be able to perceive outside the boundaries of our own nature. So we found in sound a possible tool for bridging these other realms in a non-verbal, non-language matter. Because if you think about it, sound is this physical vibratory phenomenon, which is found in the whole universe. Up until then, it's just very abstract phenomenon. But once it's perceived as a psycho-auditory phenomena in our brains, it starts to make sense as so as a phenomena for our senses. So it came from being just an outside phenomena that can get into our can be perceived by our own senses, and that actually makes even more sense when you feel something or you remember something, or that sounds actually makes you aware of something. So it travels through all these realms, through your own perception, through your own consciousness. It has all these characteristics, such as frequency, such as all these kind of modulation characteristics that can be mapped into also data. And that's exactly what we've been doing. We've been trying to do, we've been trying to make the materiality of data into sound. And for this, we've created a technique first related to sonification, now more related to a data-driven composition, in which we let all the data take on all the possible modulation characteristics in sound, and see how they can surprise us.
Yeah, and not just the data anymore. Like at the beginning, as Paloma was saying, the practice of sonification, it's more like the raw process of translating data into sound. But right now we're more in the search for finding patterns on these data sets we're working on, even if they're live or stored databases. And for this, we use a lot of machine learning to organize, identify patterns, and use those elements to trigger events over time in more like a compositional way. So in that way, we can achieve more emotional, aesthetical results than just these raw lines of data taking over pitches or frequencies or clocks in musical elements.
This I think it could be more easily seen if we go through one by one of our projects. For that, I will stop sharing for a second, and I will come back with another presentation. We would like to go backwards from the most recent ones.
Maybe I can share my screen.
I'm ready.
Okay. I have. Okay.
Yes. So this is Codex Virtualis. It's our in-process project. This has just one.
The screen is not showing anything. Sorry. Yeah, let me share from my screen. I have it ready also, so I think it's faster. So this is our latest project, Codex Virtualis, and we won the Ars Electronica Artificial Intelligence residency with this project, and in a way, it's like I don't know, the combination of all the processes we've been working on the last 7 years. And here we are using artificial intelligence, machine learning, and biology to recreate the possibility of a generative virtual life system. So in this case, we're gonna speculate a lot on what's the meaning of life as a definition in general, and what are the possibilities of emergency in systems that can be considered as artificial intelligence. Of course, this is a framework in general. There is not like a specific tool set that we can call artificial intelligence. So this is another thing we're trying to explore on this project. And it's also going to have a very strong sonic element, because we are working also with the genetic parameters of these organisms and using sound to identify those elements over time.
It's a very exciting project, because as Leslie was saying, we really want to dive into what is life considered. As you know, there's around 400 different definitions of what life is. So there's not really, there has not been an agreement in the scientific world, and it has, we just been creating different kind of relations to add on some things and other that don't fit into any of the definitions. So this project is precisely diving into this matter.
So our latest project is actually going to be presented tomorrow in the MUTEC Buenos Aires Festival. And I have opened the website to show you, but I think it's not going to change just by itself. I'm going to have to choose another.
It was a very long project that started like 4 years ago with an invitation from the MUAC Museo in Mexico City. And it has been developed over the years in 3 different versions, this one being the 3rd one.
And in this case, we are using data from the World Resource Watch system. And we're analyzing the data with machine learning to identify different patterns in pollutants in these 3 cities, Mexico City, Bogota, and Sao Paulo. And the result is a series of audiovisual compositions that narrate this process of pollutants in those cities in different moments during 1 week, 1 day, and different time tables. So I'm just gonna share a little bit of this piece so you can watch some of it and hear it. And yes, Mexico City is perfect. I'm not playing the whole piece. Better we're sharing the website so you can listen the full pieces. And if you want, you can also download it from the download area. This is a free audiovisual album available in Bandcamp. And we also have available the tools we created to be able to produce these pieces. Everything in this case is from sound to visual is related and controlled by these fluctuations of pollutants in these three cities over time. And we have a lot of time trying to figure out the relationship between, you know, the higher hours of pollution and the lowest hours, and also this relationship in between the biggest cities in Latin America, and what is that we have, you know, like the worst conditions in air quality in full Latin America. So this is something that bothers us a lot, and that's why we've been working with this subject for so long. As Paloma was saying, we started with this multi-channel sound piece, then later we created a second version, and now thanks to the support of the World Resources Institute, we were able to produce this specific album and make it open source and free to download for the public.
And the idea with this project, far from being like literal with the data sonification, it was to create some empathic tools, emotional tools that people can relate with and grasp from the graphs and from all the scientific data now behind.
Our next project, something we were working last year, like we spent the whole year thinking about this process of recurring morphing radio using recurring neural networks to explore this idea of homogenization in sound created by the streaming platforms and the algorithms that they use to recommend music to people. Let me share the website project.
This started as an invitation from the HKV in Berlin, and we started like the whole exhibition. It was called The Disappearance of Music, and it was reflecting on how music has changed, you know, over the years, not just the production of music, but also the distribution of music. And so we started thinking on streaming platforms and on how they have these engines, suggestion engines, which they know the things you like. They go through what you've been listening to before, and then in relation to all this, they start recommending what to listen next. So you probably, if you don't look into something else, you will end up listening to all the recommendations that the machine has just to offer you all day.
And in that sense, this exercise, it's looking to generate some sort of a spectral identity of what music is. And it's in a way a piece related to the work of composer Alvin Lucier that proposes this piece called I Am Sitting in a Room, where he shows to the public the transformation of sound just by using the space as a chamber of reverberation and delay, and the natural qualities of the space transforming the nature of sound. In this case, our space is a virtual space, is the latent space of the neural network. And by retraining these samples and these resulting elements from the previous trainings, we turn sound from something very specific to something totally broken and noisy and spectral. So I'm going to show you some of these elements, the process of these elements. So I'm going to start with one of the first trainings, which is still showing this musical quality and characteristics. And later we're going to see how this completely breaks apart while we retrain with the same elements to the network. So if you can see, if you can listen and see, there is still some melodic qualities, and they start this convolutional process. And they start turning into noise. So we have several hours of music created in this way. And I totally recommend you to visit the site yourself and immerse a couple of hours on the different qualities of the sound. So those are some of the still musical compositional outcomes. Now we're going to check some of the more like noisier dissolve elements, like this one.
Because the idea of the recurrent morphing radio was overconsumption equals overtraining. So the most consumed genres and the most consumed pieces on the streaming platforms are the most retrain and retrain, over retrain melodies. So it turns into noise over time.
In this case, we're trying to understand the artificial intelligence, the neural network, as a creative agent inside our loop of development. So we really want to find, those fine-tuning elements to trigger specific responses on the system, like this kind of more spectral elements where the melody disappears. But at the same time, still maintaining this performative quality in some way. So it is quite a long journey, because even if you want, we have access to the database. All the samples, all the music that is being created in the system is stored in this database. So you can go and explore each of the genres we have trained and listen to each of these sound pieces. And you can also download those pieces. Also for this, we created a neural network that is capable to name each of the tracks using a Markovian chain technique. And I'm going to show you a little segment for a piece we made for situated sounds using those samples, the samples created by the neural network, and also using the titles that the neural network is giving to each of the samples. And we created this cyber surrealistic piece. We call it like this because the results are very remind us of that. So in a sense, we wanted to, create a very classical sound art project, but using contemporary tools and contemporary sounds to create this experience of deforming and bending sound until the point where the pure nature of sound emerges and music sort of gets apart from this equation. Yeah, also I recommend you to watch this full piece. It's really a tour. And it's going to be available.
Another interactivity in which you can download the samples, and like we've been inviting artists to download all the samples and make a new production out of it, because this new piece was just made with samples. So at the end we started using part of samples of the new generated sounds to make new pieces out of.
So you have several layers. First, the elements that trigger the first training in the network, and then the elements created by the network, and the use of those elements by human artists. That's something that we're also exploring, and hopefully we're gonna have some outcomes later this year. So speculative communications, comunicaciones especulativas, was also a long-term project trying to analyze the morphological emergencies on Panibacillus vortex bacteria. For this, we have to develop several tools, like the microscope you're watching on the image. In this case, this is the exhibition setup we have for the DAD gallery in Berlin in the winter of 2019. And we also have a second part with this exercise, which is more like a performative presentation. So in the context of the gallery, we're basically setting up a laboratory where we are taking samples from different, as you can see here, Petri dishes with different samples of the same bacteria. And we record those, analyze those, and later we use those elements to be presented as a live performance.
In our journey to find patterns as a form of non-human communication, we found this very amazing being called Panibacillus vortex, and all the family of Panibacillus. That what they actually do is, if you see them in a microscope, you will see them in larvae forms, like totally dependent. But when they are in some sort of danger, they gather together And
Sure.
they form all these, you can just, and they form these beautiful patterns in order to survive. So they have two mechanisms, one mechanism of self-organization and self-regulatory system that from which they can achieve a survival mode collectively.
So in this piece, we're also using, again, artificial intelligence and machine learning techniques to analyze the bacteria, identify the patterns in the bacteria, and then use those elements to create sort of like a virtual composer that send us information and certain like data sets to play with those elements in the context of a live concert. So in this case, in the live concert, we have two elements mainly identified, clearly identified. One is the bacteria itself, as you can see in this image. And the second one is the actual machine learning analyzing the behavior of the bacteria. So the whole performance is a interplay of those, the organic element and the virtual element, and ourselves as composers being part of this communication relation process. In this case, we're trying also to enhance the aesthetic of the data as it is, of the machine learning, and also the aesthetic of the bacteria.
To try to trigger all these kind of questions around how they behave like that, why they gather the way they gather, how they move through one side and on to the other, how they detach when they detach. So it's very intriguing, very beautiful behavior that can be related, of course, to intelligence. And there's a whole subject around bacterial intelligence and how they've been evolving through all these years, even eons before us.
And in this case, we want to immerse the observer into this world of the organic and the virtual. And for those, we are using this kind of technique like three-dimensional elevations from the original samples. This is not a recreation, it's the sample itself. So in order to get us deeper into the dynamics and all the relations that are being created by these microorganisms. And it's interesting because in a way also remind us behaviors that we can look like in the stars or in the space. So it's this correlation from higher levels to the microscopic that are interconnected in sort of a fractal way. And for us, it's been super interesting to be able to observe those behaviors in the micro level.
One of the concepts in our work, one of the main concepts is this agential realism from Karen Barad and from some others before her also, which they are acknowledging agency in matter, vibrancy in matter. So we tend to think about matter and specifically the microscopic one as inert. It's very far from being inert, and it has an agency and a vibrant life that we'd like to acknowledge through all these projects.
So until here, you will see like we're being presented all these artificial intelligence projects, and this part of our practices that is being like taking our time a lot in the last 3-4 years. But we have also one part of our practice that is related to Techno Shamanism, and we're going to start seeing some of those projects, and we're going to try to explain this because it's very important for us, the possibility to combine ancestral technologies and Western technologies to create a form of art that represents both the traditions from we are like apart from and the knowledge we're being teach, and you know, as also Western educated people in that sense. And one of these, before that, I cannot jump memories, Federica. So maybe you want to talk about this one.
Spheric memory is one of our beloved projects because it has a very moving, touching interactivity with the public. So in this project, we were invited. In this exhibition is the collective exhibition called related to the olfactory system. So we were invited to reflect on the possibilities of the olfactory system, and from our research we discovered that we also smelled with our brain. We also smell with our larynx, and finally with our brain, of course. No? And so we decided to work in this possibility by what's this chemical process, please?
The chemical distillation.
By distillation, sorry, by distilling the petrichor, which is just the smell of earth just right before, right after the rain. This process it's also very beautiful. It's related with the bacteria that earth just releases after the rain, and we just turn it into a small little edible spheres, very little. So public in the exhibitions were able to taste this. It's a process called espherification in molecular cuisine, and people were able to taste the petrichor, and we call it a memory machine because as in the moment that you try this sphere and the flavor explodes in your mouth, it triggers lots of memories. So we started recording these memories. They went through, you know, from the patio of my abuela when I was 13 and I was playing with all my cousins. From I remember my late mother, which is passed, and it was like really beautiful emotional piece. That's why we love it so much. And yeah, please.
Yeah, apparently this smell is one of the first recorded smells in the human memory. It's like one of the oldest smells humankind it's capable to remember. So it's not only on your lifespan, but the whole lifespan of the humankind. That's the interesting part. So it's quite a machine in that sense, that in the moment that you have the experience, your brain is activated to speak all these past narratives and stories that you have. And again, we try to recreate as transparent as possible the process we take to get there. So the installation is the actual laboratory we needed to design to be able to create this experience. So we are sort of like doing the experiment in front of the public and giving them the samples. And this is something that we try to do a lot, because we think also this space of the laboratory as a performative space in the terms of Pickering speaks about the laboratories and science as a sequence of movements and events that repeat itself in a very organized order to be able to create an experiment. And that's a performative formula in a way. So this is a space that we like to recreate a lot. We don't have a video of this one, so sorry.
It have been beautiful. We have lots of recordings though.
So this piece is very special. It's part of this series of Techno Shamanism artworks. In this case, we're using the teponastles, a ceremonial drum that is identified on the east part of Mexico. And it's in this drum, it has a feminine characteristic for the Mayan culture. And it's a drum that is played for ceremonial purposes like weddings, baptisms, and similar events. And in this case, we created this piece after the earthquake in 2017. And we wanted to have a ritualistic space to acknowledge the movements of the earth as not just as something that happens when we have these great tremors, but something that is alive and it is moving all the time, and it's all the time trying to reconfigure itself. So we put 4 of these drums representing the 4 cardinal points. And this is connected to the seismographic center in Mexico. So we are using all the little and the big movements that the seismographic is recording on the system to play this generative ensemble of drums.
It's a very quiet piece. It's always in a small quiet room, so the sound it's going out of it. It's very gentle. You can barely hear it, but you will see the changes. No, in Mexico City, you have these little earthquakes all the time. Like it's non-stop, 24, 3 point, 2 point ish. So the piece, although it's not real time, it's all the time having these little fluctuations in the data.
And again, this is part of the idea of thinking on the earth as an agent itself. So we are sort of giving this agent this interface to express the materiality of these motions and these forces in a more gentle way and in a musical way also. And also in this ritualistic element, because in a sense, these instruments are these ancestral technologies that were created in pre-Hispanic times. And for us, it was very important to be able to work with the artisans that still keep the knowledge to create these drums. So it was a whole process of looking for a maestro, a master that was capable to design these instruments for us, finding him. It was a whole journey, a beautiful journey, and ended up in this museum that it's placed on a Catholic church in downtown Mexico City in front of Plaza Mayor, which is where the central power of the Aztec culture was centered. So it was also like some sort of silent, not silent, but quiet protest, because the Aztec dancers, they keep dancing outside of these churches, and they dance because they believe they can break them apart if they keep dancing. So we try to be part of this in a way also. So a piece that is connected to this one. This one was made before. It's called Symphony of the River. And this one was made with a community of young kids and yeah, from 7 to 17 years old from the Chilean Patagonia, specifically the part of Los Ríos in Valdivia. And we have the amazing opportunity to work with some people from the Mapuche community in there. And we learned a lot about the cultrún, which is the ceremonial instrument for the Mapuches, and about the techniques of the Mapuche community to play the cultrún. They don't have music books, as in the case of the Aztecs and the Mayans. They have very defined music in this part of the world. And they even say that if you were like out of time, that would be death sentence for you. In this case in Chile, the Mapuches are completely open. They just have two very basic rules. They play 4x4, and each time they play a new song, depending on the mood of the moment. So we tried to recreate those rules and design with the kids a machine that was capable to offer a salutation to the river every day during all the days they were installed on the gallery, because they were really concerned about the pollution on the rivers and about the over exploitation of the river, which is their main source of food and culture and everything. It depends for this part of Chile.
And it also left a very emotional imprint in us. We were really concerned on about using ceremonial drums as well as in the piece in Mexico City, and the Mapuche administrative authority that we were talking to. She explained that as long as the piece it has not been part of the ritual, it's also used just as a musical instrument. So we used it in this sense.
Yeah, and she also told us something that was very important, that it's very necessary for contemporary societies to create our own rituals. And if we need to connect to ancestral practices to do so, we can do that. And if we need to create new ones out of our own imaginations, then we have to do that, because the ritual practice is something that keeps us connected to our origins and to our position in nature. So that's why we decided to make this piece. And it's a very simple piece. Every drum is playing in this rule 4x4, but it's changing in different speeds and times according to the flow of water coming from the river. So I'm just gonna play a little sample we have here so you can have an idea of the acoustic quality of this installation. So in this case, it was very important for us to also work with the community. And this is something that we like to do a lot, to create pieces together in a collective communal way. It's not just about us imposing a technique or a strategy to produce an artwork, but having a conversation, a laboratory, a whole process with the community to get together to this solution. We even have the drawings from the kids during this process. We teach them about computer music and how to program simple sequences and electronics, and like the whole process we know we usually follow to create a piece. We share it with them, and then they start imagining their own systems. And one very beautiful comment I listened during the presentation of this was a kid saying, "I didn't know that you can make a robot out of wood." So it was, like it was really touching to be in contact in this way and in this level.
Also, one very important thing is the use of the space, also as part of a characteristic of sound, and that it would be like accompanying us in most of our projects. But we acknowledge this possibility, as a sensorial part of sound, the use of the space itself, and also its agency. So it's a multiple agency working in between.
In the same line, we have Topologies of Desire. And this work was a commission for Bienal called Proyecto Líquido in Mexico City. So in this case, we worked with a community of meditators, psychologists, and also shamans. They were interested on the idea of intention in the practice of meditation. So we analyzed their brain signals over a period of certain time during which they were asked to meditate on a specific subject. And we recorded the data to create these three-dimensional vessels that contain those intentions. And these 3D elements are later used as this to play back a ceremonial sound ritual to the public. So it's also this layer of different transduction processes from the brain waves, first from the intention to brain waves, from brain waves through three-dimensional objects to sound. And also all the possible correlations and entanglements that can be created with the community in that moment, because it was also presented as a mobile device that was going around the city giving these small sonic sessions for the public. So I will share the video. Sorry, I think I'm not sharing the proper screen. Yes.
Ahora todos somos el mismo cuerpo.
For the sound design part, we did a lot of research on pre-Hispanic instruments. So we were capable to synthesize them in digital forms, but using the same principles. Like the wind instruments, they always have this granular characteristic because they use little stones inside the flutes, and the drums and all the different elements. So we were capable to reproduce the ambience by playing them from our system in a digital and analogic way, but not the instrument itself. It was a recreation.
And what we find very important is this ability that sound has to convey meaning. So we try always to use it in different ways, but always acknowledging this possibility. The other day, yesterday, we were talking with the students, and someone asked us the question, how what has changed in your life after all these projects you made? And one of the things I thought about was this possibility of sound conveying meaning that now is with me all the time. This specific picture was very powerful. This old lady there meditating, and all the comments we had after every session, you know, when they were stepping out the little bus, it was really beautiful.
Yeah. In a sense, it's just the possibility to recreate these sacred spaces through art in a way, you know, like opening the door to have a interior moment, a moment of yourself, to disconnect from your ordinary life and connect to this collectivity. So we were super grateful to be able to do this project, and it's also part of this other interest we have about the way the human brain, how it processes and creates this reality as the main projector and receptor of all the interconnections that we are creating all the time.
We are just about over 55 minutes.
Yeah.
I really like the way we just did it up until now, because we had the first part, all the technological part, and then the second part, all the Techno Shamanism one. So it encompassed now the thing we were saying before of trying to unify ancestral technologies with cutting edge forms of production.
Yeah, I think we can continue showing work, but it's better if you want to have like a deeper understanding of this in our website. And I also want to say that all these technological developments are open source. We spend lots of time documenting our process, and we have repositories where you can access code, electronics, hardware, elements to produce sound of different kinds and natures. So if you really want to get an idea of what we're doing here, you can just go there, download something that you find interesting, and try to play around with it.
Yeah, we share our readings, we share our mistakes, we share all the things possible to make this easy for you, for the people that have the same questions, that want to reproduce the same exercises easier.
Well, thank you, Paloma and Leslie, for your really thought-provoking presentation, and for your graciousness also in sharing your work with us tonight, as well as you know, expanding it through and making it available to others. I know we have some student questions that have come in. Misael has some, and I have some. So we'll go into the Q&A if that's okay with you now. Okay. All right.
Yeah, maybe we can go ahead and get started. One of the questions that came up for students in my class was just, how did you start? How did you become interested in this kind of interspecies collaboration in this world of, yeah, like finding ways of developing new ways of communicating? Like where did the interest come up for you? How did it originate?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. Like when Paloma and I met for the first time, our conversations were all around what creates reality. And we got into the answer that everything that is perceiving is creating that reality. So plants create a way of reality, bacteria creates another kind of reality. We as humans create another level. And those levels intersect itself in different points. And so we decided that it was such a huge question to just keep it in a conversational level. And we just find the possibility to start creating experiments around this idea. And that's why we created the collective, actually, because it was just, the need to find tools and ways to continue digging on this question and to continue understanding those levels of complexity.
Yeah, I think people that know us from before Interspecifics know already that we've been boring them with all these questions, even way before Interspecifics. So yeah, it was a really cool way to just formalize the research.
Yeah. In a personal level, I have this experience that I started learning electronics at the same time that I started receiving acupuncture. So when I was attending to the electronic class, I have these readings about resistance and currents and everything. And in the acupuncture session, we were talking about the same. So this idea of the living as a mechanism, it was, just put in my mind in that moment and then opened a whole door for me.
Thank you. We have some questions that came in while you were speaking, and a few of them are from Sandra, who's really interested in your kind of notion of liveliness or life. She has a comment and a question, and I'll just read it for you. You have used terms like bacteria to describe the relationship to sound. I guess my big question is whether you're considering music or sound to be a life form, or perhaps that it has an ability to take on a life of its own. If so, then I would assume that you have a different definition of life than most people do. You also speak of sound as having the ability to bring meaning. I think music does have meaning, but that meaning is provided by its musician and interpreted in many different ways by its listener. So there's two kinds of questions there.
Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, here I think the first part here is again, the idea of the interface. Interface for us is very important because it enables us to connect different kinds of materiality, like the organic materiality of bacteria and plants and human brains, and use sound to express those processes of emergency that are inherent to life in that sense. So we can consider sound as a living form. Actually, it will be logical for our way of understanding emergency. But in this case, in this specific case, it's just the bridge where the others, in this case, microorganisms, plants, and fungi, are capable to communicate in a human level. And for this, bioelectrical activity is fundamental for us. We believe bioelectricity is a form of universal language. And in some point, we lose the ability to perceive this layer of complexity. But we are trying to reconnect by the use of sound.
And the question about the definition of life, it's very important. I just share with you two readings that we are doing now that with the research of Codex Virtualis, and one of the authors was saying that probably the thing with defining life is not how to define it, but to aim in defining it. So the main thing of defining things to make it finite. in a process that it's already a process itself. So I really like this idea that maybe we won't be able to define what life is, but try to understand it while we are living. So in the process of living, and that understanding of what life is might change, might go alive, might have a process, might have some decayings and some other processes, and I think we are in the process of understanding life in that way. I found it really interesting. I just share it also with you if you want to.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We had another series of questions from a few students that think about this notion of interconnection, which I think you spoke briefly about. Cameron, for example, writes, I became particularly infatuated with how your music plays a role in connecting humans to the non-living, but rather active and alive parts of the world. I think that we're conditioned to disregard the beauty of these things, such as rivers. And Elisa wanted to know how does studying these things and linking new ideas to non-human living things give new meaning and outlook to life? And Daisy finally mentioned, what sort of actions do you think we can take by better understanding these organisms and being able to kind of understand the, being able to relate to these non-human living aspects of our world? Like, what impact do you think that has generated or could generate?
Yeah, for us is the whole place about that, the possibility of observing something that is gonna give us a different layer of understanding of our own humanity and take us outside of this central position of power and intelligence. We are not the pinnacle in that sense, and you can understand that quite easily when you start observing outside the human realm. And that's the exercise we want to create with these artworks. Just, you know, to put there the possibility that you can do it yourself, because we are not scientists, we are not engineers, we're just artists. And in that term, it means that art can also create knowledge and can also be a knowledge that is possible to share with others. So I really want to invite, you know, younger generations to open to these possibilities, to take the power of researching, of, you know, creating their own paths. And we have everything we need there in the internet, so you can ask the questions to develop and get there. And yes, it's a really beautiful exercise to observe outside the human perception.
And also because from the view of our original people, in terms of animism, all these things are alive. Rivers are alive, trees are alive. We are just part of these entanglements, no, these living entanglements with them. And the last question was, how can we learn from them? And yes, and then something we also say all the time is, as we will never be able to perceive as they perceive, the only thing that we have left is to acknowledge the way that they do it. So what we do only is to build these kind of interfaces from which they can take over, no, and surprise us in ways that sometimes we didn't understand. And that's that. Even the not understanding, it's a beautiful part for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. There's been a few questions about the audience for your work. And one, George had a question about some of the earlier pieces I think you were playing. How has this work enhanced hearing challenges?
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I think it's like something that some concept that emerges on this process was the alternative soundscapes, because usually the soundscape is something you can easily hear while you're traveling in a city, in the space. And then we have the need to develop new tools to get into deeper layers of hearing that are not available at the first hand. So this whole idea needs to also discuss the point of noise and what emerges inside noise, because sometimes for us noise is just everything that we cannot understand or that doesn't have any meaning at all. But then with these tools you start separating those noises, and then you start seeing the emergency of patterns, and then you sort of start understanding that noise is not just noise. It's a whole level of content that we need to understand in a more fine level to start understanding these other possible ways of communication, of significance, of information, and of course of sound in all these glorious and complex derivations.
Also I understood the question in a more operative level, and as Leslie was saying in the beginning with the term of the neuroplasticity and Paul Bakirita, tools now, like what he used to say is that we don't hear with the ear, but we hear with the brain. So all these tools, they allow us to reframe the brain in order for us to make new ways of hearing, in more synesthetical ways. So we just start to learn about all these possibilities of what would evolve.
Thank you.
Yeah, we had another question relating to the types of organisms, microorganisms that you work with. Arlen mentions that she loved how you combine art and science together, and wanted to know, out of all the organisms and bacterium that you could have chosen from, what led you to pick the ones that you choose for your work? Do they have a crucial backstory, like a genetic code, or simply how they're connected to us humans that plays a role in your art? And that was also a question also from Stephanie, and Arlen specifically wanted to know if you kind of choose your microorganisms first, or if you kind of think of an installation to, and then kind of, or like an idea for an artwork, and then go to try to find a collaborator in the microorganic world that could maybe yield the type of phenomenon that you're interested in.
It's funny because I think they choose us, because it's always like this synchronization of events that led us to meet these organisms. We are not like sitting and looking in a database to find, like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, what is this? Like every organism has a history in the way we meet them. Like the Physarum polycephalum, it was presented to us by this researcher, Teresa, I forget the last name of Teresa. Sorry, Bauhaus researcher that asked us to
Schubert.
Teresa Schubert. She was talking us about this amazing organism that was capable to solve energy problems. And so we start talking about biocomputers and the possibility of creating biological switches, electrical switches, by using this organism. And later, some months later, we received this invitation to be part of this research in the Bauhaus University. And then a whole year of our lives was all about growing Physarum, learning about Physarum, becoming Physarum in a way. Yeah. So we can be able to produce this piece we created at the end. And then that ended us to have an amazing new friend in Teresa, And this, so it's like human connections that are facilitated by the organisms and their abilities. But at the same time, there are superorganisms, because we're really interested on the possibility of intelligence on these microorganisms. So we look for these special qualities also, you know, like solving problem bacteria, motion, collective organizational bacteria, like the vortex bacteria. And I don't know, it's always about what can we learn from them. And when we know that there is a lot of, you know, knowledge that you have to take, then we take the risk and start the process to get in touch with the organism.
Yeah, Panibacillus was the same. It was the researchers at the Chilean researchers. They go to Patagonia every year for mushroom to gather. Yes, and that time they discovered Panibacillus because they were cultivating and it was disappearing. So they every morning they go to the and it was not there. So they started discovering that it was moving. And then once they started watching it, they started seeing that all these patterns emerging. And then they just say, you have to go and see this. You have to come and see this. And yes, we went there.
Apparently, we have this software that we were just like developing that time, computer vision system to detect motion. So we were showing this software to a group, and then the scientists came and I have to watch this organism with this software come to my laboratory. And yeah, now we're really good friends after that process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Misael, do you have another question from your students that you would like to ask?
Yeah, we have. So in the class, we've been speaking a lot about speculative fiction and speculative technologies and the ways in which science fiction can allow us to think past the kind of limitations that we face, both, I think, technological, but also social at times. And I think that your work is thinking about speculative communication, I think, in a really amazing way that invites us to imagine what might be possible. And I think along those lines, Minnie wrote, I think, a really interesting question. She writes, you mentioned that microorganisms have their own microscopic realities. Since your machines allow us to share in and perceive a part of the realities, have you observed anything about microscopic organisms' realities that you might share with those of us who haven't worked with them as closely? And I think that you've already started to do this in thinking about like this notion of collectivity, right, as a form of survival. But then she writes, do you think that they can hear their own frequencies amplified? And what do you imagine their realities are like living in your machines? Are they happy little composers or unassuming?
This is actually quite a nice question, because we intended to answer this question in a very technical, scientific way. So with our collaborator, Carles Tardío, a researcher, physicist, mathematician from Barcelona, he managed to got this space, the camera, what's the name of the chamber? It's an isolated space that has not sound at all. You can hear your heart inside this space. So it was the setup, a special setup to listen the frequencies generated by the bacteria. And everything was, you know, by the rule, the microphones, special microphones, amplifiers, so on and so on. The technical description was correct. So the hypothesis of being able to listen to them was everything on place. And then it turns out that during all the experiments, the only signal he was able to gather was this subsonic noises coming out from the buses going outside the university. So we were unable to listen to the bacteria responding to our sound. But in another experiment on a piece called Microrhythmos, we speculate that some of the reactions that we gather from the bacteria are related to the phenomena of the bacteria listen their own patterns being played to these loudspeakers. So we still have this idea. We don't have the tools right now to solve the problem, but it's something that is in us like all the time. We want to be able, and I think this is going to be respond in a more atomical level, not in the biological level, but the democratization of quantum tools are still very limited. So maybe in 10 years we're going to be able to answer this question fully.
There's also something very important that is, of course, to speculate. It's a fantastic tool for artists to not get trapped into the scientific, rigidity. But we have to also acknowledge that sometimes, this we are not letting these organisms to be in their real environment. So there's also a very important critique we have to do in terms of working with living organisms and how sometimes they are under stress, and the opportunity for us to acknowledge this in our work and try to avoid them as what is in your hands to do it. But this is not something that is happening in art laboratories. It happens also in scientific laboratories. So there's also this acknowledgement that we have to do, that they might be sometimes under stress situations. Some of the studies and some of the things they do it because they are deprived of something in the real environment. So it's also important to acknowledge this.
Yeah, and one last thing that we also acknowledge is that the observer is the one that creates the results on the experiments. So that's like the loophole in science, like they cannot find anything else they are not looking for. So that's why most of the time we are trying right now to detach our human observation process and embed it into the machine so we can, open a space for the other kind of symbiotical emergencies that are not precisely, the connotations that we're trying to give to these organisms or phenomena that we are experimenting with.
Yeah.
The students always have questions about collaboration, and so as opposed to working by themselves. So could you talk a little bit more about what it means to be in a collective and how that actually operates for you?
Sure. It's hard, but it's beautiful. And of course, in political sense, we're living in a moment where this idea of the authorship is less and less relevant for the creation purposes. And in that sense, being part of a collective is like gaining superpowers, because everything that you can do by yourself in 1 year, 2 years of your own process and research and investigation, it's going to be powered by the, number of people you are working with. And it's gonna be influence. So I think in a collective as a system, and a very cybernetic system where all the parts that are together are influencing each other. So there is no level of control, but it's a level of influence. And that gives a space for new forms of creation and imagination to emerge outside the, lonely position. And one example of this for us, which is very important, so you imagine yourself as one person, right? I'm Leslie, Paloma, Misael, so on. But you have all these bacteria in your guts. They're super important for your psychological processes and your living process in general. And then 1 of every 10 cells in your body, 1 is only a human cell. The other 9 are external cells. So start imagining yourself as a collective entity, not as an individual. And from there, working with other people is going to be completely natural because, you know, this cooperation process is the key and is in the DNA of life itself. So we are actually prepared to work in a collaborative way.
And also from a self-development point of view, the way you learn to negotiate, the way you start learning to communicate your ideas, to negotiate your ideas, to make the deals in between the boundaries of what you think and what the other thinks and what the final idea is. It's really rewarding. You might be in a safe space by yourself, but these challenges, social challenges that start, if you overcome them and you see the final piece, you might get into fights, it's not perfect, but if you overcome all these negotiations and you see the final piece and you see all the people you've been working with represented in this piece, this is it's a beautiful feeling.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we can maybe wrap up there. And just another thank you to Paloma and Leslie for sharing your work, and I think inviting us to think about how we're connected to one another, how we're connected to the world around us, and how we can live in a way that acknowledges that connection, and I think seeks to understand how we should be more in tune with one another as a way of healing ourselves and healing the world around us. So thank you so much for your very powerful work, which demonstrates that in such a beautiful way. So thank you again, and thank you everyone for joining us. We have one more session of Resounding Visions, so join us again next week for the presentation by Kip Malone. Thank you for being here. Thank you again, Paloma and Leslie, and I hope everyone has a good day.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
Yeah.
Hope to see you again.
To see
Bye.
you again too. Bye.